India's political game changer. The Supreme Court bans religion and caste from election campaigns. But will it work? Also on today's program, Nigeria claims a major victory over Boko Haram militants. But has the government spoken too soon? I'm Imran Garda, and this is the Newsmakers. It's the world's largest democracy, and in India, religion and politics have often been inseparable. That's why a recent ruling by the Supreme Court is expected to have a big impact on how people get elected. India's highest court has banned candidates from using religion and caste to get themselves elected. If politicians break the law, it will be considered corruption, and they'll lose their votes. It's meant to keep elections secular and eliminate undue influence from the process. But some critics say it's such a radical departure from how things are done, and that it will be impossible to implement. The current Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, rose to power on a wave of Hindu nationalism. Other parties say they exist to improve the lives of people from lower castes and minority faiths. So, what will the law mean in practice? Our newsmaker today is India's Supreme Court, as we ask how its decision to outlaw targeted campaigns will transform Indian politics.
A landmark court ruling that is expected to dramatically change India's politics. The Supreme Court has banned politicians from using religion and caste in their election campaigns. India is officially secular, but most political parties consider a person's religion and caste when selecting candidates, and also when trying to attract voters. Hindus make up nearly 80% of India's population. The next largest religious group is made up of Muslims, with around 14%. Much of Indian society operates under the caste system that defines a Hindu's place in society, divided into 4 main categories. And then outside the system are the untouchables, or Dalits, society's lowest of the low. India has 7 national parties, and most are accused of exploiting divisions based on religion or caste. Whether it's lower caste leaders promising to right historical injustices, or parties promising perks or protections to either Hindus or Muslims, whether it's subtle or overt, religion and caste have undeniably been intertwined in Indian politics. So how will parties operate now without them? The court ruling was issued ahead of a wave of state elections, including in the most populous and one of the most religiously diverse states, Uttar Pradesh. If the law's to be adhered to, politicians will need a major change in strategy. For years, Prime Minister Narendra Modi's ruling BJP has fought elections on a Hindu nationalist agenda. In the past, its members have been accused of making anti-Muslim statements to polarise Hindu voters. But the Supreme Court ruling has been welcomed across the political spectrum.
People should seek vote on secular issues such as development, such as other issues affecting the country.
Those who have infused religion into politics of this country have corrupted and destabilized it.
We believe that if all political parties follow this in letter and spirit, voters will be able to decide in a fair manner.
But there's concern this could stop positive social change. For example, by blocking politicians from mobilising Dalit or low-caste voters by campaigning for their rights. And there's scepticism over how this law will be implemented and policed. The question is, how big of an impact will the Supreme Court ruling have on Indian politics? Will politicians truly be able to untangle themselves from religion and caste, and who will benefit and who won't? Yvette McCullough, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now from Mumbai is Priyanka Chaturvedi. She's a spokeswoman for the main opposition party, the Indian National Congress. And in New Delhi, Nalin Kohli, the spokesman from the ruling BJP party, is also an advocate at India's Supreme Court. Also from the capital, Badra Sinha, the Supreme Court correspondent for the Hindustan Times. Thanks all of you for joining us. I just want to dispense with something very early on, Badra Sinha, and start with you. This is how elections go in India, right? This is part of India's DNA, where identity politics are built into how people vote and how politicians appeal to these voters. So it is potentially a major change, isn't it?
Well, yes, but before I actually give you an insight on the Supreme Court judgment, I just want to make one point very clear. Our election law actually defined corrupt electoral practices. So under the present law, an appeal made by a candidate or his agent or by any other person with the consent of a candidate or his election to vote or refrain from voting for any person on the ground of race, caste, creed, religion, and language was already defined as a corrupt practice. So what the Supreme Court has actually done is, it has actually widened the scope of the law, and it has very categorically said that an appeal made in the name of even a voter's religion, race, caste, and creed will now be corrupt practice, and a candidate who is selected or who wants an election on the basis of such an appeal, his election can be set aside if a complaint is filed before the court.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt you because we have three people here and not a lot of time. Nalin Kohli, for 70 years, this is how it's been done, right? You've had people voting as blocks, as entire villages, as entire communities for their race, for their caste, and politicians have appealed to them in this way. So, my question is, in the next election and in the elections to come, are we going to see a major shift, or is this just something symbolic from the Supreme Court and it's going to be business as usual with identity politics as we go along? What do you think?
Well, I'd like to build for a moment on what Bhadra said, and I'd then like to just give you a small historical perspective. We need to be aware of the fact that India follows a secular constitution since 1950, when it came in. And essentially, the point is that in India, there is no state religion, so it's not a theocratic state, because that division on a theocratic basis took place when Pakistan got created. India chose the secular path. So our secular polity has been there. At the same time, you've had the Representation of People's Act, which is the electoral law that Bhadra was reading out, and that section 123(3) clearly has put it in. So as I see it is that, in a sense, the Supreme Court has actually stepped in and reaffirmed this ideal. It has strengthened that ideal and said that we need to now come to a point where this is implemented. Now, though critics of this are tending to say that it's unimplementable because of the nature of polity being over the last, religion, and what would qualify as a corrupt practice, because that becomes into the realm of its implementation. So my argument to that is that having a lofty ideal is necessary and even critical. Otherwise, we'll never strive to it.
Let me ask you, Mr. Kohli, do you believe, Mr. Kohli, sorry to interrupt you.
Just to finish one more sentence.
Very briefly, please. Yes.
The second is, are elections being fought on it? Ironically, most people tend to look at it from a loose perspective that the 2014 election was a mobilization on the basis of, say, religion. It wasn't. That perhaps was an election where development and the mandate was for change in terms of development. And ironically, on the very day, later in the day, the judgment came. In the morning, Prime Minister Narendra Modi was actually speaking at a very big rally in Uttar Pradesh, some 600,000 people, where he was saying, why should we not be contesting elections only on development? So, why do we need to bring in caste?
So to be absolutely clear, if the Supreme Court law was in place back then, you are absolutely adamant that despite quite a lot of evidence that the BJP ran on a Hindu nationalist platform, you're still convinced that the BJP would have won as clearly as they did?
No, I haven't said anything like that. That's an incorrect assumption. The BJP is identified with the Hindutva politics, there's no doubt. You have to trace that to the 1980s Shah Bano case, where a Muslim lady was denied under the constitution and under the act, various civil rights that are available, maintenance, and the law was changed for her. So that's when the movement of, the whole uniform civil code and all got currency in 1980s, although it is part of the constitution from the from the first
Point well made. Let me bring in Priyanka because she hasn't had a word yet. Priyanka, would you agree that both main parties, the BJP and Congress, have played this game for the past more than 60 years? Everybody's equally to blame when it comes to identity politics and appealing to blocks of voters depending and based on their identities.
So there's just two things I'd like to mention here. While Nalin Kohli does mention India being secular in nature versus Pakistan choosing Islam as its ideology, as a nation, Islamic nation, we chose to go the secular path. And 1951 Act, People's Representation Act, also goes to say that. However, when he talks about the context in terms of history, he needs to keep in mind that this is a party, the party which is in power right now, came on an agenda which spoke about making India a Hindu country. It spoke about rights for the Hindus more than any other religion. So, and this is a party also which brought up please allow me to complete, Mr. Kohli. I was listening to you politely. So this is also a party which went on the Hindutva agenda, and we saw the Babri Masjid episode happen and how they tried to move from 2 seats in the parliament to 282 seats that they hold today. So this is something which is going to impact them simply because it has become a part of their ideology.
Badra Singh, I want to bring you in. Can we still expect, for example, in a place like UP, for Dalits to vote for someone like Mayawati because that's the expectation? So despite this ruling, you'll have the Muslim vote and you'll have the Dalit vote and so on and so forth.
You know, I feel that this judgment is actually a wake-up call to the politicians and the political parties who have till now been playing politics not on merit and development, but politics on polarization to divide people along narrow identities of religion, caste. Let me just emphasize, the judgment is just not restricted to religion only. It's, you know, division along narrow identities of religion, caste, creed, language, and race. And this particular judgment has actually affirmed the secular ethos of our constitution, which is unfortunately being forgotten by the political parties. And I think the judgment will actually be truly implemented in spirit if the politicians who are, and the candidates who are going to polls in the upcoming elections in the crucial states will actually abide by it and will try to follow it.
Yeah, Mr. Kohli, would it be improper and corrupt for
yes,
example...
I also feel...
I'm sorry, Badra, I have to come in because we're running out of time. Mr. Kohli, would it be improper and corrupt for, say, a religious leader, maybe a priest, to say, I choose this particular politician from the BJP, and you as Hindus should vote for this politician? Under your interpretation of the law, would that be accurate or improper?
My way of looking at it, yes, it would broadly be improper. I mean, a priest or a Islamic, someone who's a padri from Christianity or an imam can certainly go out there and vote. But to appeal in the name of religion would broadly, in my understanding, be improper. 2 quick comments that I think what the BJP's stand has always been has been no appeasement of anyone. That's the difference with the Indian National Congress. So we basically say that every citizen has to be equal. No one can be over the other. And we consider that there's been an appeasement policy for the minorities, which is particularly the Muslim community. And that's been the crux of the which is the Shah Bano case of 80s, Rajiv Gandhi being then the Prime Minister, and the Congress Party. So we on the other side obviously mobilize and have in the past also had religious reasons to say so. The second is that in terms of everyone having practiced it, yes, I also have the advantage, and Priyanka has that disadvantage, of having been part of a case where the Congress Party in its manifesto in a state of Mizoram, which is Christian majority, had even said in 1987 that we will form a Christian state. So I think, we need to see this with a little bit more of aloofness and from probably the legal perspective. And on the political perspective, we are going to spar.
Let me grab that and throw that at Priyanka. Priyanka, there is evidence. I mean, I was following, there was a rally in 2014, a Rahul Gandhi rally, where Congress politicians were saying, hey, the BJP have done nothing for you Muslims. We're going to help you out, Muslims, and so on. Are we going to see less of that moving on and more based on issues rather than identity?
No, so when Bharatiya Janata Party reminds us of our manifesto and what we promised to the people, it is unfortunate that they do the pointing out, especially because it has been a part of their manifesto, especially for Uttar Pradesh, that they would build a Ram Mandir there, considering that it has an acrimonious history. The cases in the Supreme Court, they continue talking about it, and it is part of their manifesto as well. Now, having said that, now when you bring in 2014, let me remind you that this was in reaction to the campaign that we saw coming from the Bharatiya Janata Party. While the Prime Minister kept speaking about, who was then the, heading the entire campaign committee, he kept speaking about the development agenda. There was a very underlying campaign which spoke about more rights to a particular community because they would vote for the Bharatiya Janata Party. And we have seen that post-2014, we have seen social welfare schemes for particular castes and communities coming down. We have seen how, there has been religious tension, there has been a religious divide, especially in Uttar Pradesh. So these are some questions which arise when you speak of development, but the underlying message is totally different. That's where the dichotomy comes, and that's where the question needs to be asked of the government, that when they speak about welcoming this entire judgment coming from the Supreme Court, how serious are they about implementation? Because even in the Uttar Pradesh campaign...
Okay, we'll have to... I apologize, Priyanka. I'm going to have to jump in there, Priyanka, and we'll have to see, the proof is going to be in the eating of the pudding. The thing that I hate the most about my job, Badra, I know you're chomping at the bit. The thing that I hate the most is that I have to move on to another segment. Unfortunately, I've got to wrap. I know, Nalin, you disagree with Priyanka. I would love for this to go on and on, but I just cannot. Thank you very much for coming on the program. I hope to have all three of you on the program again in the not-too-distant future.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you.
As 2016 drew to a close, Nigeria's government declared it had all but defeated the terror group Boko Haram. President Muhammadu Buhari said the militants, who have waged a campaign of violence for 7 years, had been driven from their final stronghold in the northeast. With their leader reportedly killed, Boko Haram was on the verge of collapse, or so we were told. But was the announcement premature? Days later, the supposedly dead leader, Abu Bakr Shekau, purportedly resurfaced in a video to say the battle was just beginning. So, how much territory has the Nigerian military actually retaken? And how much trust can Nigerians put in their government's claims of victory? Natalie Pahernan explores.
For 7 years, Boko Haram has terrorized Nigeria's northeast. The group once controlled an area the size of Belgium, but its territory, including its stronghold in the Sambisa forest, has been shrinking as the army advances. And President Muhammadu Buhari delivered this Christmas message. He'd received the most gratifying news of the final crushing of Boko Haram in their last enclave. But independent journalists reported the area was blocked off and the government's claims could not be verified. And the group's leader, Abu Bakr Shekau, purportedly appeared in a video released the next day. That video message hasn't been authenticated, but Nigerian officials have said several times that Shekau has been killed. And that's raising questions about whether military action has actually crushed the group. Buhari entered office promising to defeat Boko Haram. And under his presidency, the military has intensified its offensive. In December 2015, he said Nigeria had technically won the war against the group, which is affiliated with Daesh. But Boko Haram continued to carry out attacks last year, and the number of victims from the insurgency keeps growing. The group has killed about 15,000 people. It's kidnapped women and children, including more than 200 schoolgirls from Chibok, although some have since returned home. And years of fighting has displaced more than 2 million people. With such realities, is it premature for Buhari to declare another victory over Boko Haram? Natalie Pahernan, The Newsmakers.
I'm joined now by Temitope Olodo in London. He's a counter-terrorism expert and author of Faith, Community and the Law. He's also worked for the British government and in law enforcement. Thanks so much for joining us, sir. So, just before Christmas Day, we had the president saying the last Boko Haram base was taken in Sambisa Forest. He told the BBC Nigeria has technically won the war. He said the fighters were on the run. And, you know, everything seemed very optimistic. Was that correct? Was it presumptuous, or was it just propaganda?
I think using the word of Mr. President that is used many times, I think technically it is a bit correct. But I think it might be deemed by international viewers as being premature. For the local context, in terms of the local population, it's a message that people have been listening to. Well, for many analysts who work in this field, there's more to be desired, because the issue of Boko Haram and the issue of terrorism is a global war. And when you're fighting a global war, you need to look not just at the internal consumption information and law, but also the external consumption. What is happening in Libya? What is happening in Syria? How does the activities of Boko Haram feed into regional security issues? Those are the kind of information that need to be taken on board. And that more or less exhibits itself when, unfortunately, in less than 48 hours or a few days after, the pronouncement by the president, these individuals have come up again with another video, which the security agency said they are looking into to identify, the authenticity of it and where it was taken. But again, from my perspective, there are a lot of things, or a lot of questions that need to be answered.
Mr. Loda, you say there are many questions. One of the major questions I have, Abu Bakr Shekau, I've lost count the amount of times I've read reports that he's been killed only for him to resurface in another video. And of course, questions about who's actually running the organization. Are there two Boko Harams, one by Shekau, run by Shekau, and the other one run by Barnawi? What can we know and what do we know about their leadership right now, or is it all a mystery?
It's more of a mystery because there's so many leaders within Boko Haram. There's Boko Haram that is moving around, that works in the government establishment. There's Boko Haram within government, within the community that feeds information to them. There's Boko Haram that are killing themselves with through suicide bombing. Boko Haram is all around. It's a faceless organization. So for you to say you defeat an organization that has many faces, you need to really understand what you mean by Boko Haram. And until the government is able to understand what are the drivers of terrorism in Nigeria and have an appropriate policy to address those drivers of terrorism and ensure that they decapitate, that, energy, that oxygen that is feeding the de-radicalization, then Boko Haram will continue to remain elusive and they'll continue their hit-and-run activities in the country.
Something that you just said there, first up, you said there's Boko Haram within the military or within the government. That just popped out for me. To what extent do you actually believe that Boko Haram has infiltrated state institutions? That's quite shocking.
I think it's important to understand that Boko Haram was tolerated for some time within the population where they were. And even if you look at what have happened in the last few days, after the president declared that the ground zero had been captured, 14 of their members were killed. Now, for 14 Boko Haram members to be killed, there have to be more than 14 that actually attacked the military barrack or outpost that they attacked. So those individuals have absorbed themselves back into the community. Where are they hiding? Who are their brothers? Who are their sisters?
Okay, but that's the community. But you said the military. You said within the military. I mean, I'm asking you, within the government, do you believe that there are Boko Haram, I don't know, hidden agents or sympathizers that might be making it easy for them to survive as an organization?
I was listening to a press release why I'm proud to comment on this interview, and they were talking about the fact that one of the local Boko Haram suspected member, I must say suspected member, that was picked up, being accompanied by a local authority official.
Wow.
So there are people that are sympathetic to the Boko Haram cause. And we need to understand that, just like there are people that are sympathetic to the Al-Qaeda ideology. There are people like that in the community. Now, do government have initiative in place to fish out those kind of individuals? We don't know, because Nigerian counterterrorism strategy is not in the public domain for us to know what kind of strategies are there and what kind of initiative communities need to use to identify these individuals. Until you have a counterterrorism strategy that is people-driven, it will be difficult for you to win totally the war on terror.
I remember covering the election, and President Buhari ran on the platform that he was a military strongman. He didn't mess around, he didn't play games, and he was gonna finally destroy this terror organization. So based on that metric, has he failed?
It has not really failed. There's still enough time. Boko Haram has never been eradicated anywhere in the world. There are 162 countries that are experiencing one form of terrorism or the other. And what Nigerian government needs to look at now is that what has those first 10 countries that have successfully dealt with the issue of terrorism, at least brought it down, done? At the moment, I feel they're working hard, but I think there's still a lot that needs to be done.
So it's been a pleasure to pick your brain. Temitope Olodo, thanks for joining us from London. You've been watching this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.